Good morning. It's the start of a brand new week, which means there's the last 9 days of the Tarot Readathon. I'm going to take this a little bit. I'm going to take this through next Tuesday just to finish up the month in this one video. Last night I was able to finish 4 books, which means I got through all but one of my current TBR. Prime Deceptions is still on the list. That one is a little bit of a longer book, so I wanted to focus on the shorter ones first. According to the audiobook, I have 13 and a half hours left of that. I'm only 4% through, but I have started it. It's just taking me a little bit to get through. So, first up yesterday, I finished Horror Store by Grady Hendrix, and I really enjoyed it. It felt silly in the beginning. It's like being trapped in an IKEA, but not IKEA. But it was fun. I was never really scared, even though the characters were trapped and fighting for their lives, but I had a good time reading it. I enjoyed it. And then next, what did I read next? I read You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White, and oh boy, check your trigger warnings before you go into that one, because that was a doozy. I felt vaguely sick the entire time I was reading it, but I think that was the effect that they were going for, because I still ended up giving it 4 stars because it was just very impactful but very grotesque, and yeah, definitely not for everybody. And then I read Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins, and I enjoyed this a lot more than The Hunger Games. I think I liked the characters more. The first half was a little slow, but the second half, once they got into the arena, I enjoyed seeing the different character dynamics and how they all worked together or didn't work together. And um, even though I'd vaguely known, hi, even though I'd vaguely known how things were gonna go because um, I'd seen stuff about the movies. Even though I hadn't seen the movies, I know what happens. But it was still fun to read about, just the different characters in general. And yeah, I love Finnick, and yeah, that's probably going to hurt me in the next book. And then last, I finished Orbital last night. It was such a short book. It was for the prompt shortest on my TBR. That one was boring. I couldn't really get a sense of any of the characters or which POV we are supposed to be in, since it kind of melds between all of them in the chapter. And there was no plot. I didn't get the point of it, and I think it tried to get kind of lyrical and introspective at the end, but I was not into it, and um, I didn't. For me, I didn't see the point of it, and it, even though it was so short, because I was just not interested, it felt like it dragged on. So unfortunately, that one was a miss for me. But I did pick 3 new books for this week, so I've got 4 on the TBR. There's Prime Deceptions, and then the 3 new ones I've got: Two of Swords, read a book featuring multiple POVs; Nine of Wands, read a book with survival elements; and King of Cups, again, read a book with guidance or mentorship. For the multiple POVs, I picked This Story Might Save Your Life. Benny Abbott and Joe Moore host one of the most beloved podcasts in the world. Each week, they delight listeners with a different, against all odds survival story, gleefully finding the weird, life-affirming humor in near-death experiences. Since their first episode on Joy's experience with severe narcolepsy, they've been the best friends everyone wants to befriend, and thanks to the meticulous management of Joy's husband, Xander, they've built a lucrative empire. The problem is, their next survival story may be their own. When Benny arrives at Joy and Xander's one morning to record, he finds shattered glass in an empty house. The one clue shedding light on the couple's disappearance is the incomplete, previously unseen first draft of Joy's memoir. Benny will stop at nothing to find them, even as the police zero in on him as their prime suspect. Millions of devoted listeners think they know the real Benny and Joy, but as the hours tick by and the odds seem increasingly stacked against Joy and Xander being found alive, not even the most devoted fans could guess the terrible secrets their favorite famous BFFs could have hidden from the world and from each other. And then I've got Breathe In, Bleed Out for the survival story. Hannah has been running from her demons ever since she emerged from a harrowing wilderness trip with her fiancé. No one knows exactly what happened the day Ben died, and Hannah would like to keep it that way, even if his ghost still haunts her with vivid waking nightmares that are ruining her life. So when her friend group gets an exclusive invitation to a restorative spiritual retreat in Joshua Tree, Hannah reluctantly agrees in search of a fresh start. Despite her skepticism of the strange guru pacts and his belief in the supernatural world, Hannah soon finds healing through all the yoga, sound baths, and hot springs offered at the tech-free haven. But this peaceful journey of self-discovery quickly descends into a violent fight for self-preservation when a mysterious killer starts picking off retreat attendees in increasingly gruesome ways. As the body count rises and Hannah's sanity frays, she'll have to confront her dark past and uncover the true nature of a ruthless monster hell-bent on killing her vibe for good. And then again, for the mentorship prompt, I couldn't think of anything more fitting than to finish out the Hunger Games trilogy with Mockingjay and bonus points because it has been recommended. And it's the third of the original trilogy. I'm excited. Our new team challenge is the Chariot card, which is to read a thrilling or fast-paced book. I don't know yet if any of those will fit. At the very least, I think Breathe In, Bleed Out will. If not, The Story Might Save Your Life or Mockingjay. So I've read Prime Deceptions last night, finally. And as far as sequels go, it was okay. I own the first and second book in the trilogy, but I don't think I'm invested enough in the characters or the story to buy the third one. And the library doesn't have it either, so I don't know if I'm really gonna finish out the trilogy. It was okay, but I wasn't invested in the story or the characters this time around. So it's a little bit later, and I finished First Grave on the Right by Dorinda Jones. This is my second time reading it, but my first time was, at least 10 years ago. And so I didn't really remember everything in it, but I do remember it's about Charlie Davidson, who is a Grim Reaper and also a private investigator, and together with her both living and non-living friends, she helps solve cases, investigates things, and generally just tries to stay alive when people are trying to kill her on an almost daily basis. But I read it for the Lovers card, which is read a book that features a romance, and there is a good romance in here. She spent most of her life thinking about this person who has also shown up and saved her at times when her life was in danger, and they finally meet. She finally finds him after, 10 years of not having any information about him, and finds some things out. And this is it's fun. It's lighthearted. It's like a CW show. The writing isn't going to be something that makes you super pensive, but it's a fun time. You come here for a fun time, not a deep time. And I enjoyed it, and it was a really fast read. Hey. Hi. So today is Wednesday, June 24th. It's officially less than a week till the end of the Tarot Readathon. Last night I did manage to finish another book before bed. I finished We Used to Live Here by Margaret. Hey, can you girls settle down? I finished We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. It was for the Three of Wands read a book set somewhere you've never been prompt, and it's about a young queer couple who flip houses. They find an incredible deal on a historic house in a historic neighborhood, and one day this family knocks on the door and says, "Hey, my dad used to live here. Can we take a tour of this place?" And nothing seems to go right ever since. I was on edge the entire time reading this. It took me a little bit to kind of figure out what was going on. I don't think I really figured it out until the main character, Eve herself, kind of lost it, so to say. And that's when the pacing of the last couple of chapters kind of slowed. I wasn't as on edge, but it was still really creepy. The ending was not my preference for an ending. It was very ambiguous, up to interpretation, but it was also by no means of any stretch a happy ending. And I love happy endings. I know they're not realistic. I know not every story is going to have one. So it's not my preference of an ending, but this is such a good book. Like I said, I was on edge and creeped out the entire time of this book. So hats off to Marcus Cleaver. I think this was his debut. I think it started off as a serialized story on a Reddit forum, but I'm not sure about that. But yeah, it was an amazing book. So it's Thursday, June 25th. I did not get much reading done today because I had to go run some errands, go grocery shopping, and then we kind of sat outside talking for a few hours with friends, and the day just got away from me. I did not have much downtime for reading. But yesterday I finished a couple of books. I finished This Story Might Save Your Life by Tiffany Crum. I enjoyed this story. It's told from Joy's memoir point of view, and then Benny in the present as they're going through the investigation and trying to figure out where Joy is or what happened. And I didn't guess the ending. I like the happiness that they found. The only thing that kind of gave me the ick is I could tell right away what specific podcast inspired their podcast and inspired the story. And then as I finished it, it was confirmed in the acknowledgments that it was kind of modeled after this one specific podcast that I used to listen to, don't anymore, and it gives me the ick. And it did that. Their podcast elements in this book gave me the ick, because it was that specific one that I don't like anymore. So unfortunately, that kind of docked it a little bit, but I still overall enjoyed the story. I read this for the Two of Swords prompt, which is read a book with multiple POVs, and it was pretty. It kept moving. It didn't really stall much. And yeah, so I read that, and then a surprising read that I finished is also The Collected Regrets of Clover by Mickey Brammer. This was recommended to me almost 2 years ago now, and I never felt interested in picking it up, but I got the Hierophant card, which is to read a book that's been recommended to you. And this was the only one in that list that I was in the mood for, of, this list of books that were recommended to me that I just haven't gotten to. And this was a surprising underdog. It felt like a sucker punch to the gut. It's about Clover, who is a death doula. And so the description is, what's the point of giving someone a beautiful death if you can't give yourself a beautiful life? From the day she watched her kindergarten teacher drop dead during a dramatic telling of Peter Rabbit, Clover Brooks has felt a strong connection with the dying than she has with the living. After the beloved grandfather who raised her dies alone while she's traveling, Clover becomes a death doula in New York City, dedicating her life to ushering people peacefully through their end-of-life process. Clover spends so much time with the dying that she has no life of her own until the final wishes of a feisty old woman send Clover on a road trip to uncover a forgotten love story, and perhaps her own happy ending. As she finds herself struggling to navigate the uncharted roads of romance and friendship, Clover is forced to examine what she really wants and whether she'll have the courage to go after it. And I fell in love with this story. I fell in love with Clover, and it was so endearing and so heartwarming. And like I said, it was like a sucker punch to the gut. I was crying my eyes out by the end. This is a big 5-star for me. Which is surprising because when I read the description and, when I was told what it was about, I didn't think it'd be something I was interested in. But yeah, that's a big, I loved this, I loved this, I loved this. Happy Friday. I did actually end up finishing 2 books last night. good stretch. The first one I finished is Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen. This was for the Two of Pentacles prompt. Read a book where the main character faces a big decision. And this one is all about this straight-laced, rule-abiding Chinese-American lawyer who's got a surgeon husband whose old college roommate one day shows up and asks her to get involved with this counterfeit purse scheme. And the most of the book is told through her talking to a detective without any quotation marks. It's like she's making a report to a detective, I guess, which adds some element of mystery because you're like, okay, how did it get to that point? What went wrong? How did they get caught? That kind of thing. But I think the second part, because it's divided into two parts, and I think the second part was a lot more interesting than the first because I really just wasn't invested in the story or the characters. And at the end of the day, the ending didn't go the way I was hoping. It didn't go the way I was expecting, and I don't think that was a good thing. I didn't like the ending. I didn't like how the story shook out at the end of the day, and I really just wasn't invested in any of the characters. I guess the reveal and the twist just weren't big enough to really tip the rating over. So overall, it was just eh. And then the next one I finally finished was Breathe In, Bleed Out. It actually took me a few days, even though it's a shorter read. That one was for the Nine of Wands survival prompt, and this is about Hannah, whose fiance died in the wilderness, and she's got survivor's guilt dealing with hallucinations and the PTSD of that, and her growing Xanax addiction, and her friend convinces her to go on a spiritual retreat to kind of cleanse herself and heal. And at that retreat, her and her friends get picked off one by one by a mysterious killer. And overall, I thought this book was cringy. It was campy, but not in a fun way. The killer reveal annoyed me highly, and the motivations were stupid. All the characters were insufferable, and it just didn't... I didn't like this one, unfortunately. So it's Saturday the 27th, and yesterday I did manage to finish 2 books. I was only planning on finishing one and then getting started on another one, but that didn't end up happening. So first off, I finished The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. For the Eight of Pentacles prompt, read a book involving creativity, art, or learning. And it kind of centers on Alicia Berenson, who was a famous painter married to a fashion photographer who seemingly has a perfect life. And one day she shoots her husband and then refuses to talk. So she ends up in a mental institution? I don't know. Some type of hospital in London. And this psychotherapist wants to work with her and is kind of obsessed in his goal to help her while also dealing with his growing obsession with his wife's infidelity. And I did not see the ending twist. I also did not like or trust Theo's narration. Theo fell flat for me, but the book itself was okay. I think I'm middle of the road with it. It wasn't my favorite, but it was not the worst book I've ever read by any means. And then for Queen of Pentacles, read a book with a nurturing or caring main character or something to do with motherhood. And I chose Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I only intended on starting the book and not, getting a good head start with it, but I had to stay up until I finished it. I cried multiple times. Tova Sullivan, her husband just died a couple years ago from cancer, and her son died 30 years ago in a mysterious boating. She says it's an accident, but the cops kind of rule it as a suicide. And she works nights cleaning the aquarium. in town, and she becomes friends with Marcellus, who is a giant Pacific octopus. He does get a point of view in this. Marcellus does have a voice in this, and I thought that was so unique and so heartwarming. And he is nearing the end of his life in captivity. And he decides he has one mission before he dies, and that's he wants to help heal Tova and her wounds, because she saved his life when he was stuck and almost about to die. Marcellus is also an escape artist, and his escapades are just so fun to read about. And it also follows Cameron, whose mother was an addict and disappeared when he was a kid, and he comes into possession of a couple of things that she left behind, one of which was a class ring that he thinks belonged to his father, and that leads him to that little town that Tova and Marcellus are in, and on his quest to find his father. And it was a beautiful story. I knew early on how everyone was connected, even before Marcellus told us, but that didn't change how I viewed the story, because to me it wasn't about knowing the connections, it was about growing with the characters and wondering when or how they would figure out the connections. And it was beautiful. And then today I watched the movie, and there were a few differences, but the movie made me cry just as much. And it's on Netflix, so highly, highly recommend. This gave me 5 stars. I mean, I gave this 5 stars. It was such an emotional story for me. I cried, and it's one that it's been on my radar, but I wasn't sure it was going to be the story for me. And 5 stars. It was. I'm so glad I gave it a chance, and I don't know if I would have had it not been for that tarot prompt. It was beautiful, and I highly enjoyed the movie as well. Good Sunday morning. For the Eight of Cups prompt, read a book about a character moving on or starting a new chapter. I read Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldree. Unfortunately, this was a little lackluster for me. It wasn't as cozy, and it focused more on Fern, who we met in Bookshops and Bone Dust, and I didn't really love Fern as much as Viv. And so this being, centrally Fern plus some new characters, and there really wasn't as much of Viv at all in this. There's something about it that I think was missing. It didn't have that same spark for me that the original Legends and Lattes had with Viv. So I liked this one even less than Bookshops and Bone Dust. And I liked that one less than Legends and Lattes. So, unfortunately, this one was okay, but it wasn't great. Beep beep. Good Monday morning. It is the penultimate day of the Tarot Readathon, and I officially hit 50 books read this month. Yesterday I finished Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang for the Six of Pentacles prompt, which is read a book that was a gift or a library book, and I got Bat Eater from the library. I don't know how best to describe this book. Cora Zhang is a crime scene cleaner after witnessing the brutal murder of her sister, and that happens on page in the first chapter, and I was aware of it. I knew what happened, and I still was not. Don't do that. And I was not fully prepared for how it went down. It takes place during the first stretch of the pandemic, before anyone knew it would last that long, and in New York City, where there was in the book, there's a lot of anti-Asian sentiment, and so there was a lot of racism in it. This book made me cry, but it didn't have a perfect ending for me. There is one element that I don't want to say because of spoilers that didn't that meant it wasn't a 5 for me. I got chills. I was sad. This book made me feel things. And then I read Havoc, which is shorter. For the Eight of Swords prompt, read a book that intimidates you. For some reason, every time I see this cover and this book, I'm like, oh, yeah, I should read that. And then I just get a little scared. I'm like, no, not yet. And I picked it up. And I kind of wish I didn't. I hated this. It boils down to another pandemic book. This time it takes place in Egypt. And it boils down to an 81-year-old woman who is delusional in that she claims that she's fixing people and setting them free from their relationships, but really she's just breaking people up and causing chaos. And one day, a single mother and her son check in, and it turns into a war between them. And basically, it's an 81-year-old woman beefing with an 8-year-old boy. And there's animal cruelty, there's people lose their jobs, there's murder. And I hated every second of it. I'm like, oh, it is. And a lot of it is psychological, and it's one of those where you don't know what's hallucination, what's real. And definitely, we have unreliable narrators. Well, one unreliable narrator, which is the 81-year-old woman, because it's all her point of view. And so, really, you don't even know if it's just one-sided beef at the end. But it was stupid. It was annoying. It pissed me off. I think it's the lowest rated book of the month so far. What the? I kind of wish I didn't read it, but at least it's off my TBR. So I managed to finish 2 books today. The first is The Wicker King by Kay Ankrum. It was for Nine of Pentacles. Read a book with a small cast of characters. And it's about when August learns that his best friend Jack shows signs of degenerative hallucinatory disorder. He is determined to help Jack cope. Jack's vivid and long-term visions take the form of an elaborate fantasy world layered over our own, a world ruled by the Wicker King. And Jack leads them on a quest to fulfill a dark prophecy. And even August begins to question what's real and what's not. And I wish there was more fantasy in it. Overall, it was okay. I didn't love it, and I didn't like the ending explanation for the fantasy world. But I do think it had mental health rep in it. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, I wish it leaned more into the fantasy for my personal taste. And then also I just finished Mockingjay, which is the third in the Hunger Games original trilogy. For King of Cups, read a book featuring guidance or mentorship. And again, I thought it was okay. I think just the pacing in this installment was different than the previous 2, and I really didn't like District 13, so the beginning was hard for me to get through. It made me not want to pick this up for, it took an entire, I had this borrowed from the library for an entire week before I read it. And the ending still felt unsettling for me, which could be on purpose, but just wasn't my preference of the 3. I think the second one actually is my favorite so far. So for the 6 of Wands prompt, read a book featuring politics or political intrigue. I just finished Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. And it's about Alex, who's the first son of the first female president of the United States. And he accidentally creates a little bit of a scandal with the Prince of Wales. And they end up becoming friends and more. And it's their relationship, and I liked the characters, I liked their relationship, I liked their friend group and the support that they had. What I didn't like is in a book that has a queer couple and a bunch of representation in it, why are there so many references to a book series by a very problematic author who is very phobic and not great. And so that really, I found that to be really careless, and it knocked it down a star rating for me. I couldn't love the story because of that. It took me out. So it's the final day of the Tarot Readathon, final day of the month, and I finished 2 more books. For the Emperor prompt, read a book with high stakes, I chose Charlie Donnelly, Some Choose Darkness. In the summer of 1975, 5 Chicago women went missing. The predator, nicknamed the Thief, was arrested. 40 years later, he's about to be paroled. The only crime the DA could pin on him is his wife. And as a former client of her father's, Rory Moore, who is a forensic reconstructionist, becomes reluctantly involved with the killer. And now he wants Rory to do what her father once promised, to prove that Angela is, in fact, still alive. So as Rory begins reconstructing Angela's last days, another killer emerges from the shadows, replicating those long-lost murders, and it's Rory's investigation into all of that. And this was gripping. I guessed the big reveal, but when I was proven right, I felt more vindicated than annoyed. I was glad it went that way because, I don't know, it was really gripping. I think this one was one of my favorite Charlie Donnellys so far because there seemed to be less threads convoluting all of it where you're wondering, okay, why is this connected, this connected, this connected. It felt more focused than his other ones have. So I enjoyed reading this one, and it went by fairly quickly. And then last, for 4 of Cups, read a book that's been sitting on your shelf or TBR for a long time. I chose another Agatha Christie. This one was Murder in 3 Acts. This has been on my shelf for literally at least a decade, probably longer. The UK version of this, I believe, is called Tragedy, or 3-Act Tragedy. This is the US mass market paperback version of it. But this one is it's another Poirot. But the Reverend Stephen Babington seldom imbibed, but for the glittering soiree given by renowned actor Sir Charles Cartwright, he indulged in a cocktail and fell over dead. Since there was no trace of poison and no motive for murder, the case was closed. Then an identical death at a London party with the same guest list presents Poirot with his most unusual mystery. In need of both clues and suspects, the masterful detective stages a dinner party of his own, at which death is the guest of honor. And this was really interesting. I didn't guess the killer at the end, but I wish there was more Poirot in it. Poirot vaguely is in the first act, and then the second act, there's really not much of him at all. He does return in the third act, but for such a short book, I kind of wish he was in it more. But overall, I didn't guess it. Agatha Christie got one over on me, and I did enjoy it. And that brings us to 55 books finished this month. Will that be enough to lead my team to victory? I don't know, because we've kind of held at second place the entire month. So who knows, but I had fun. I read a bunch of books that I probably wouldn't have picked up otherwise, or not yet anyway. And I found some new favorites. Let's go through some of my stats here. So total, I read 43 books that contributed to our weekly challenges out of the 55. I did all the daily tarots and the other challenges, the self-care challenges, for an extra 80 points. And then total pages read, I read 20,091 pages. And of those, 7,025 counted as bonus pages, which means total page points contributed were 27,116. And that's just wild. I've got my tarot deck here, and this is the size of the normal deck, and I started separating them out. So these are the cards that I have not used, and these are all the cards, all of the prompts, plus some duplicates that we did manage to pull this month, and that's over half the deck. And then I did also keep track of all of my rankings for the month. There was no DNFs. So I finished everything I started this month, which is awesome. I usually don't DNF a whole lot anyway, but I had one-star book. So my lowest rated book of the month was Havoc. I did read that this week. I did 4 2-star books, 16 3-star books, and the bulk of my reading this month, I had 31 4-star books and only 3 5-stars. But majority of my books, over half, I've rated highly, and I find that to be an amazing success. And my top 3 books of this month were The Wedding People, The Collected Regrets of Clover, and Remarkably Bright Creatures. 2 of those I read this week as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the readathon next year.